Hello, everyone, and welcome to First Draft Friday. I am your host, Alessandra Torrey with Authors AI, and today we are joined by the incredible Robin James, and we're going to be talking all about using setting in your fiction, and specifically small town setting. So welcome, Robin. It's fantastic to have you here. Do you want to do just a quick introduction to the audience?
Sure. I'm Robin James, as you can tell from the screen. My main bread and butter claim to fame, such as it is I write legal thrillers in small town settings. I have two series. One follows a prosecutor, the other follows a defense attorney, and they're in different states, but all of my fiction is in that small town type setting.
Fantastic. And so when we're talking about setting, for those of you, we have both new and experienced authors who join us for this show. How would you describe setting? It seems like a very basic question, but is setting all five senses? Is setting just a place? What do you think of when you think of setting?
For me, setting, and particularly when I'm talking about a small town setting, to me, it's a vibe. It's the vibe of the book. And it doesn't matter if you're writing romance, which I have done on other pen names, or if you're writing a mystery, or really any type of genre or niche. Setting is, on the most basic level, it's the geography, the where is your story set. But when you do it correctly, or at least when you really get in a groove with it, it can draw in character as well. In fact, I always try to think of setting as a character in and of itself, and try to give it the personality and flavor, just like I would when I'm creating the people that live in it.
And on that note, when do you think about, so you write often in series, or are you all?
I'm all series, correct.
Okay. Yep. So are you, when you're plotting out that series, or you're thinking about starting a new series, is setting one of the first things you think about before you ever write any scene?
It is. It absolutely is. It is the first, every time I approach a new series, and I'll give you a little scoop. I haven't really I've kind of hinted at this in my newsletter, but I am in the middle of planning a brand new series of legal thrillers. And it is the very first thing I knew that I wanted to do was that I want it to be set in a northern Michigan fictional town where my character actually lives on an island in Lake Superior. So I do, like, it absolutely starts with, where is this going to take place? What kind of environment are they going to be playing around in? I build the Barbie house, if you will, before I put the Barbies in it. So it is absolutely number one, first thing that I do.
And are yours mostly northern small towns?
The two series that I have out right now, yes, but Midwest. The Cass Leary series, which is probably my most popular, is set in southern Michigan. So that would technically be considered the Midwest. Yeah. My second series takes place in Northwest Ohio. So actually, geographically, they're only about an hour away from each other. So they do kind of cross over from time to time. But yeah, so that is, but I think that a lot of the principles that you would use to create wherever it is are universal.
Do you think it's important that you have lived or are very familiar with, like, if you compare a southern small town to like a Midwest small town, there are a lot of ways that they are similar, but there are so many also cultural differences between the two. Do you think it's important that you have a history kind of in the area or the region that you're placing your small town?
I think that it helps for sure. There's a lot of colloquialisms or customs that are unique to whatever geographic area that you're in. And you see these things on Facebook all the time. You're a Michigander if, or you're a New Orleander or whatever if, and it has to do with how words are pronounced, or the difference. You call it versus pecan. Right. So I definitely feel like things like that. And here's just one small example. Here in Michigan, if you order a Diet Coke or a Dr. Pepper or a whatever, it's a pop. And we do not call it soda. We do not call it Coke, like these places where for whatever reason you can order a Sprite and they call it a Coke. I don't understand that. But if I were to call that soft drink the wrong term. If I call it a soda, I'm telling you, I will get called out.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't believe from readers. And they're very indignant about it. And so, I mean, that's just one example, but there are a lot of things like that where I think it does help a lot for it to become more authentic to the reader if you can get those details right.
100%. Yeah. One of my early books, I based in Los Angeles, and I had it snowing in a scene, and the reviews, like, I looked up, and it has snowed in Los Angeles before, but it's like one of these like 1 in 100 years type thing. So
I saw that episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer where it snowed, so don't tell me.
Oh, good. See, I knew it was coming from somewhere. Okay, so when you are building a setting, and if you are, what about real versus a fictional town? So, like with your new series, is it going to be set in a real town, or is it a fictional town? What are the pros and cons of each?
For me, I really feel like I can boil down the pros and cons to: do you choose a real small town versus a fictional small town? They're the same. The pros are you know it and people know it. The cons are you know it and people know it. Personally, I prefer to create a fictionalized version of a town that I'm familiar with. For example, and this is another kind of cool thing that my readers enjoy, because they're especially the ones that are from the region, they're familiar with it, and they'll literally try to figure out where it is I'm talking about, because I have never heard, for example, in the Cass Leary series, she's in Woodbridge County. There is no Woodbridge County in Michigan. There's a lot of reasons why I do it that way. One of the main ones is I was a practicing attorney in the county where I lived for 20 some years. I don't want people trying to guess, that sounds like
Judge a specific client.
Right. So I mean, there's the lawyer in me that is like reticent to try to like make it so that someone could say, well, that sounds like this person or that lawyer or that whatever. And I will say right now, as a disclaimer, none of my characters are specifically based on real people. But so there's that. I mean, you can avoid that thorny issue of maybe someone thinking
potential association with a real person.
The other thing that I think is just flat out fun is like you can take, let's just say it's your hometown, and we're all either from a small town or we all, or I shouldn't say all of us, but that small town feel is something that a lot of people can really resonate with. But what I love is I can take this small town and I can kind of tweak it a little, fictionalize it. I can put a university there that doesn't exist, or I can make it so there's a state park over here that becomes central to one of the murder plots or whatever it is. So what I will actually do is I'll take a county map, and I don't know like how, in Michigan we have counties. Not every state has, whether it's your county or your precinct or whatever your particular state. And again, I'm talking about the United States, and I'm sure this is all, wherever you're from, your borough, your county, your
Providence.
Thank you. Whatever it is. You take a map of it. And what I did in the Cass Leary series is I took 3 counties that were all sort of connected, and I just carved out a triangle right at every corner and created a fake county that was right there. And you don't have to be that specific, but it was kind of nice because it helped me visualize, okay, well, there's an interstate that comes in here that may come into play. And it does. Or just different geography. Like there's a lake here. I could put a lake there if I wanted it to be. So I have had a lot of fun just, in one of my series, it's in a county that I grew up in, but fictionalized and expanded. In another, the series that I'm planning, it's Northern Michigan, again, a county that doesn't exist. And I'm putting an island, private island in the middle of the Great Lake that I want to use. And, creating, okay, there needs to be a bridge system. There needs to be, like, how are they getting, like, do they have all things like that, just kind of springboard. And my favorite thing to do of all time is deep dive the history of whatever fictional county or area And you can talk about plot bunnies and ideas that can springboard from, whether it's ghost stories or how that county was founded, can lead to all kinds of interesting potential areas where your story can go. And it's a lot of time, it's like that iceberg analogy where the reader in the book sees the tip of the iceberg, but what's going on underneath is what I need to know as a writer, so that when I populate this area, it feels more authentic. I know where I see it in my head, or I can actually go, if it's someplace close to where I actually live, I can go drive there and get ideas, especially when you're plotting murder mysteries. That helps, where you go figure out where the bodies are buried and things like that.
Well, two things. One, to anybody watching, I can see that we have a full room, but and it might just be that y'all are quiet today, but I am curious to see if our comments are working. So if anybody has any questions for Robin as we go, or any comments, please don't be shy, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, feel free to chime in. The second thing is, it's interesting because when we talk about small towns, there's a big range, right? Because I am from a small town that is actually, we do have, okay, great. We have comments. So that's fantastic. I am from a small town that is really tiny. I mean, it's a one stoplight town.
Right.
But we had a big town that was 7 miles away that had like Walmart, but it was still considered by many people, especially in urban areas, it would be considered a tiddlywink town. So do you need to, I guess, especially if you're in series, you need to have a town where you can have multiple murders happen, or multiple situations that.
Well, yes and no. I mean, yes and no, because like I also collaborate on a series with my husband, who writes as Declan James, and we created this small town in Southern Ohio. And it's, as the series goes on, the joke we're always telling is like, please never go there, because the murder, it's the murder per capita in this tiny town that we're creating. So, and if you look, there's a lot of like Longmire is another one. Like, never go there, because like every visitor
won't be nearly as exciting as
So I think on the one hand, yes, but on the other hand, especially if you're writing a small town type mystery, it's just kind of almost a trope,
It's expected that there's a much higher body count.
Right.
And on this note, we did have a question from YouTube. John says, do you combine factual aspects of an existing town with creative characteristics? And it sounded like that is kind of what you do, right? You take the best of, you add what you need, and you borrow what you have.
Absolutely, I do. Like, for example, in my legal thrillers, obviously, I was an attorney for a number of years. I technically still am, just paid my bar dues last week. But the court system in Michigan is, I don't care what county you're in, you're going to have lower court is called a district court. The higher court is called the circuit court. And, so those details are going to cross over. I'm going to create this fake county that has the same judicial system as any other county in Michigan. And Ohio's different. That's another thing. In Ohio, the court systems are different. You have your lower court is the municipal courts. The higher court is the court of common pleas, no matter what county in Ohio that you're in. So yes, I do combine, though I'll take the real structure and just superimpose it on the fictional county that I do. And it's great too, because it can help you stay out of those plot corners that you paint yourself into sometimes. If you have this, well, this is just how we do it here, or this is like, I know that there's no, there isn't a woods here off this section of I-94, but in my fictional county, well, darn it, there is. So
let me ask you, if you are using a real place, because we talked about the pros, and if you are using an actual small town, what is your understanding of what you can use in terms of, can I use Bob's Diner if Bob's Diner is a real place? Like, can you use real businesses, or is that breaking some sort of a legal rule? Are you familiar
with the caveat that I obviously can't give legal advice? I personally, I would be uncomfortable with that.
Okay.
Particularly if you're going to use that particular diner or whatever in a disparaging way, or in a way that could be construed as disparaging. And, and the other thing is, you can also just go into Bob's Diner and say, hey, I'm, I
need a place for a dead body. Can I put it in your freezer?
Right. So, I mean, it really does depend on what you're writing. I probably personally wouldn't do that, just because I'm going to always be overly cautious. And I know, like, it's going to be made up.
Yeah.
My disclaimer at the beginning, how like it's fictitious, and any similarity to people living or dead is totally coincidental, and it is. So I think you probably can do it, but I just feel like it's fraught.
Yeah. And I can see both sides. I recently, I ran into like a fishing captain here in Key West, and some person had wrote a book and named him as a character and made him a fishing captain. And he had like copies of the book in his truck, and he gave me one. I mean, he was like a walking billboard for this book. But I could easily see it also not going well, especially, if you don't ask permission. Mel said, and this is a little bit about your iceberg, how much of your setting research actually winds up in your novels?
I'm going to just take a number out of thin air and say it's probably 20 to 25%. And with this in mind, though, when I'm creating a series, there may be details that just do not show up in book number 1, but that will bleed through or come up in another book down the road. In fact, I'll do a lot of the times when I'm writing one book. For example, one of the ones I was writing, I created a lake, and I knew later on there was going to be a body that washed up in this lake. So it's kind of like you don't have to
have a lake without a dead body.
Right. So you don't have to be super details. I mean, I have like ideas for books that are going to come down the pike, but I know some authors are so like completely detailed, and they have a map of what they're going to do for the next 17 years or whatever. So I do tend to keep a bit of a series Bible, although I'm not as good at it as I should be. I'm constantly going back and saying, wait, well, where did I put that intersection, or where? And it may not be something a reader would pick up on, but again, it helps me to I have that place in my head. It exists as a real place in my head, so that when I sit down to write whatever scene or book, I don't have to think about it. It's just there.
That makes sense. Another question is, why small towns? If I'm an author and I'm thinking about a setting and I could put it in a big city or a small town, why do you choose to write in small towns, and why would an author go that way versus not?
In my case, it was definitely in one sense, it was a write what you know, for sure. But additionally, I once again always think of the setting, the geographic setting, as a type of character to the book too. Where, and it's things like, what are the tropes of a small town? Everybody knows everybody. There's maybe like, it might be that it's one of those towns where you feel safe leaving your doors unlocked at night. When you go into town, it's kind of, or like, think of, I just thought of like Cheers, the TV show Cheers. When you walk into the bar, everybody knows your name. It's, hey, Norm. So that type of feel is what appeals to me. And it's also a fantastic way to connect a series. Like, take romance for a moment. You write a romance and you have a couple meet, have challenges to them getting together. If you're writing a true romance, they do get together in the end and have their happily ever after, or happily ever for now. So, then where do you go from there? So if you use, it could be, let's just say, if you like Virgin River, if you use a small town setting, then what can connect the next book is, we're going to take a different couple in this same town. So I'll have some universal characters. You'll go into Bob's Diner. Maybe they meet at Bob's Diner in this episode. Or maybe the sheriff that we met in book 1 becomes the protagonist in book 4 of your romance series. So it's another really great way to connect to connect a series so that every time that reader comes into it again, they feel familiar. That's like, I get to go back to Delphi, Michigan, which doesn't exist. I get to see these people that I have grown to love in this 10 or 11 or however many book series. And it's like, if you think of the television shows or books that you love that have really effectively used setting, I think of, one of my all-time favorite series is Outlander. When I first read that book, I really wanted to be Scottish. It turns out I am a little bit. So the same. But or shows like Fargo, obviously, it's right in the title, or even Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Sunnydale is very much a character in that series. Yeah. Or if you want to look at, I mentioned Longmire, but another one I think that does a great television show that does a great use of setting is Justified. Mm-hmm. In Harlan County in Kentucky. That is a real place, but again, that geography, that town becomes integral to the telling of the story.
So we have a couple of great questions. So we'll try to move. I'm keeping an eye on the time. We'll try to move through them quickly. First question: is it easy? Do you think it's easier to get away with murder in a small town versus a big city, or harder?
Wow, I'm going to give you a lawyer's answer. It depends. That almost sounds like, are you planning something?
Yes, I'm planning my next. That's okay. It depends.
In my small towns, there's a lot of places to hide bodies.
There's a lot of busybodies. I was thinking also.
Right. That's the other thing. That's the other thing. There's you could not as many witnesses maybe in the small town, but again, that's the downside of everyone knowing everybody. So I think that one depends.
From someone on Facebook said a series Bible is a great idea. Do you do general outlines for your entire series?
Yes, and emphasis on the word general. My outlines tend to be a Word document or actually a Google document where I just list things as they come up and try to categorize them as setting, characters, and I'm not as good at that as I wish that I were. I've seen all these different bells and whistles software that you can use that I've paid for and downloaded and never use. And for whatever reason, I'm just more of a jot it down as I go kind of gal.
And I love this question from Rob on YouTube because it kind of goes into our next topic, which is how to incorporate setting in your writing. So Rob said, what particular details do you include in setting in order to make it a character?
For sure, climate is part of it. If I'm setting something in Michigan, it's going to matter what season we're in. Mm-hmm. We all know here in Michigan what pothole season is. It's the spring. So that's one of the downstroke things that you have to make sure that you establish if you want it to be authentic. For me, having the geography, at least in a general sense, set where I will actually draw a crude map. What I've done is I'll actually print a map out of my county. And in Michigan, we have counties and they have even smaller townships within those counties. So let's say I'm going to take, I'll just take Lenawee County in Michigan and all of the townships that are in it. What I'll do is I'll actually cross out all those township names and make new ones. And then I'll drive around. I've set a book in Hocking Hills, Ohio, but we turned it into Blackhand Hills because we did the research and found out there was a cliff face where a black hand, a Native American black, painted hand was on the side of a cliff face. So that's how I came up with the title for it. So, I think it depends. I think for sure with small towns, it's going to be close-knit community. Geographically, it can be small, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes you've got these counties where you're driving through massive farmlands and wooded areas and all kinds. So it could be a geographically large place, but you just want to be real careful not to overdo it in the sense of that it's the iceberg. Your readers need the tip. You need what's underneath.
So when you're actually creating a scene, like you sit down, you're writing chapter 1 or whatever else, how are you introducing your small town and your scene in your actual writing? And especially if this is like book one of a series and they don't know this small town, how are you delivering that setting actually in your scenes?
Gotcha. Well, in a specific example, in my Mara Brent series, if you open any one of the first 3 books, it always starts with where the body was found. For example, I had one where the body was found at a quarry, and it was a quarry where all the kids that would that's where in the summertime, that's where they'd go swim. So I always start those books with where the body was found, and it's always a place that had a different connotation to the town. And all of a sudden it becomes this site now that's turned into that place where that horrible thing happened. So that's the first way that I do that in that particular series, is I take you exactly where the body was found, give you a very, maybe no more than the paragraph history of what that place meant to this town. And then now it's become the jumping off point for this horrible crime that now has to be solved.
That makes sense. And then I know a lot of new authors and experienced authors suffer kind of with word vomit with setting. Yeah. So do you typically, are you sprinkling in, like, are they slowly becoming absorbed, in your setting as you go? Or do you typically start scenes with kind of a description? How do you let the readers know kind of each scene? And I don't just mean like the small town. I'm actually talking about like if they entered Bob Steiner,
right. I don't have a hard and fast rule with that, but generally speaking, I'm going through an editing when I'm on my second and third pass of the book. I want to make sure that I'm not putting much more than a paragraph in an entire chapter that relates to descriptions. And that's one thing I get that feedback a lot. My writing, I'm pretty to the point. Mm-hmm. I don't use a lot of descriptive, I'm not telling you what color people's eyes are or their hair is, or, it'll be just a sprinkling, I guess, so that you have the flavor of it. But if you really want to avoid that info dump. I might have done the research on the black canned sandstone that makes up my fictional town, but the reader doesn't need to know that.
Yeah, that makes sense. We have a question from Andrea, who it sounds like reads your books. She said, "I love the way you mix fictional settings with real places I know. Delphi, am I pronouncing that correct?"
I say Delphi, like
Delphi.
Yeah.
Delphi feels so real when characters go down the road to Ann Arbor. I keep trying to figure out exactly where it is on the map. So that's interesting. So are you using real cities around your main city?
Yeah.
Like you make references to real locations, real brands?
Yep. My Cass Leary series, she lives on a lake, which I live on a lake. You can't see it. I'm actually surrounded by woods right now. But actually, if I could I'm not gonna, but if I turn my camera, there's actually a swan right out here on the lake that's coming up. Yeah, he like 2 of them. Yeah, they'll come up looking for bread.
Nosy thing. Yeah.
Breads to swans. Full disclaimer. Don't advocate that. But I will refer to, like, for example, Delphi, Michigan is in my fictional county. But we have like the Irish Hills area of Michigan is where a bunch of inland lakes are. It's kind of famous in the state. So I'll refer to it, or Ann Arbor is the closest large city to where fictional Delphi is. Mm-hmm. So I do. And occasionally I will have my attorneys go into a courthouse in a real place, although the main story isn't going to take place there. But yeah, I do sprinkle out just to kind of give the readers a flavor of where this is. I want them to go look. My favorite thing is when they go on a map and try to figure out where it is. It doesn't exist. It's in my mind. But but honestly, if you came down here and drove around the Irish Hills area of Michigan, you're in Delphi. You could this is it. This is where it is. So the topography, the little tiny one stop sign towns, they're all here. And that's what I'm writing about.
I love that. We are officially out of time. So we do just have a quick comment from Linda. She just said that she's writing a novel with a small fictional neighborhood in her own city. It's like a village, everyone knows each other, etc. But when they go to real recreational facilities, but they go to real facilities, support the local team, go to the restaurant. So I love that.
Great way to do it. Yep.
And I loved everyone's comments. Thank you so much for participating and joining us live. And thank you, Robin, so much for joining us today. It was fantastic to have you. If this is their first time hearing from you or hearing about your books, where would you suggest they start if they'd like to read one of your novels?
I would start with Burden of Truth, which is the first book in the Cass Leary series. That is generally the entry point for most of my readers. But you can find out more information at robinjamesbooks.com.
robinjamesbooks.com. Be sure to check that out. Also, you can read samples of most of Robin's books at bingebooks.com. You can look her up there. And thank you again. We will be back in 2 weeks with another First Draft Friday. Thank you so much, Robin. It was great to have you. And thank you so much to all of our live attendees. We will see you guys in 2 more weeks. Bye-bye.